over the north of Beijing, as the visibility drops, you'll still see things with perfect clarity.
Very cold weather to come across a good part of North America. This wintry plunge is set to persist. We've got snow now making its way away from the central and southern plains. That will sweep its way through quite quickly, actually, as we go on through the course of Thursday. So brighter skies coming in behind, but boy, is it going to be cold. -4, a top temperature for New York, and -12 there for Ottawa. Struggling around freezing for DC, and we're looking at highs of just 9 degrees in Atlanta. About the only warmth I can offer you really is going to be down towards that southeastern corner, 26 there in Miami. Even Dallas will struggle to reach freezing. -2 could be the top temperature here on Thursday then. Some warmth too into the western side of the US, and notice some snow coming into BC, so western parts of Canada still staying very wintry once again. That snow pushing in over the higher ground. Come down into the Caribbean, and there's quite a rash of showers here. Some wetter weather just making its way across the Gulf of Mexico. Not too bad for the Greater Antilles, and even the Lesser Antilles I think should stay largely dry, but down towards the south, Trinidad and Tobago, maybe pushing as far north as Barbados, could see 1 or 2 sharp showers. Showers or longer spells of rain continue to drive their way into that western side of Europe, but on a southwesterly wind, it's mild. Temperatures getting up to around 12 degrees Celsius, but cold on the other side of Europe, with Moscow at -13 degrees.
Qatar Airways, world's 5-star airline.
On the next Riz Khan show, as speculation mounts over the return of ousted former President Aristide, we discuss Haiti's unexpected political twists. Riz Khan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
The times change. The instruments evolve. The battlegrounds shift.
This is America! Our country!
But the international struggle continues.
He was murdered!
Uncompromising, hard-hitting investigations.
I can't get no justice from no one in Jamaica.
People and power, at this time on Al Jazeera.
A new voice of dissent on the streets of Egypt. Workers join the chorus calling for change. Hello, this is Al Jazeera live from Doha. I'm Veronica Pedrosa. Also ahead, put him on trial now. Italian prosecutors are calling for immediate action against Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. A split in the ranks. Muslim rebels are divided as they head back into negotiations with the Philippines government. And cuts versus spending. US President Obama grapples with the dilemma ahead of next week's budget. So it's 0300 hours GMT or 5 in the morning across Egypt, where mass protests are entering their 17th day with no end in sight. Thousands more union members are also expected on the streets. Officially, they'll be asking for better wages and more rights. Unofficially, their strikes are being seen as a boost for anti-government demonstrations. Behind the scenes, a committee of so-called wise men have met Vice President Omar Suleiman to discuss a possible transfer of power. But despite those talks, the deadlock between the government and the protesters continues. Here's Ayman Mohedin.
Well, the political standoff between President Hosni Mubarak's government and the so-called Committee of the Wise Men continues without any progress, really. The so-called Committee of the Wise Men has put forth their demands, which are also representative of some of the protesters' demands that President Hosni Mubarak step down and transfer power to Vice President Omar Suleiman to begin implementing constitutional reforms. But the president seems to be very much entrenched into holding on to power, at least until the end of his term in September. Many feel that is an attempt by the regime to consolidate its grip on power, and many simply feel they are just empty and false promises. They've seen promises about reform made in the past without being substantiated, and they fear this could possibly happen Now, for his part, though, the belief is that if the president were to step down for any reason, he would transfer power to the speakers of the Egyptian parliament. And in that case, he would be forced, the speaker of the parliament would be forced to carry out elections in 60 days under the current constitution. And by many people's assessment, the current constitution is rigged in a way that it would favor the ruling National Democratic Party, because they would be the only ones allowed to nominate a candidate. And therefore, the opposition parties would not be allowed to nominate any presidential candidates. So many are describing that really the ace in the president's back pocket, which is not allowing him to step down. And it's certainly something that is being used to back or push back the demands of the protesters and the opposition, saying it would lead to a bit of political vacuum and chaos without bringing the much-needed reforms that the protesters and other members of Egypt's opposition are demanding. Now, all of this is happening as the protesters continue in Liberation Square, with some of them moving closer to the symbolic heart of Cairo at the Parliament building. There's a sit-in taking place there that is lasting throughout the course of the evening. And all of this against the backdrop of some very interesting developments with Egypt's labor force. Thousands of workers representing different sectors and industry have gone on strike. And it's a momentum that many of the protesters say will add to their cause for President Hosni Mubarak to step down. Whether or not these labor strikes continue to grow in the coming days will be watched very closely, because they represent a very important element of Egyptian society and could widen and increase perhaps the pressure against Hosni Mubarak to step down.
Well, the protests are now spilling out of Liberation Square and spreading to other parts of Cairo. Hundreds of pro-democracy demonstrators are camped outside Parliament. It's a sign that protests are entering a new phase, with people taking their message for Mubarak to go straight to the politicians. Gatherings outside parliamentary buildings are usually banned, but in a surprise move, the army is allowing people access. Elsewhere in the country, 4 protesters have died and about 100 people wounded in clashes with police. In the western province of New Valley, anti-Mubarak demonstrations started on Monday night. Several people were injured and taken to hospital. Reports say they were the first serious clashes in the province since the 28th of January, when a day of rage was observed. The cabinet formed by President Mubarak in response to the protests is coming under pressure. The newly appointed culture minister, Gaber Asfour, has quit. His family say it's due to health reasons, but Egypt's main daily newspaper, Al Ahram, says that Asfour, who's also a writer, was criticised by his literary colleagues for taking the post. Asfour was the only new face in the new cabinet. The US is now warning Mubarak's government not to wait the protests out, but make the reforms the people are calling for. On Wednesday, President Obama spoke to Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah about the crisis. He stressed the importance of, quote, taking immediate action towards an orderly transition. From Washington, our White House correspondent Patty Culhane has more.
On the streets of Egypt, the protesters make their point with their presence. In Washington, D.C., the message is being sent from this podium, a list of demands.
Lifting the emergency law. One of them is our constitutional changes so that we get toward free and fair elections. But I think it's obvious that they've yet to meet the threshold.
The response from Egypt sent through the American media. The U.S. can't tell Egypt what to do.
How can you ask me to disband that emergency law while I'm in difficulty? Give me time, allow me to have control, to stabilize the nation, to stabilize the state, and then we would look into the issue.
The Egyptian foreign minister raising the possibility of the military taking over. To that, the Obama administration responded that aid could be on the line.
We will evaluate their responses to and their level of restraint will be evaluated as we make decisions on our aid.
The Obama administration is also reportedly facing pressure by Israel to stop pushing for Mubarak's departure. At the White House Wednesday, Defense Minister Ehud Barak in high-level meetings on Egypt. WikiLeaks cables show who they want to be in charge. The U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv saying in 2008 that when Mubarak steps down, quote, there is no question that Israel is most comfortable with the prospect of Omar Suleiman. In another cable, a U.S. diplomat writes, quote, Suleiman told us Egypt wants Gaza to go hungry, but not starve. Saying, quote, in their moments of greatest frustration, Tantawi and Suleiman each have claimed that the IDF would be welcome to reinvade Philadelphia if the IDF thought that would stop the smuggling. The new Egyptian vice president, up until Wednesday, the Obama administration's very public choice to lead the orderly transition, now beginning to temper their public praise. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Turning to other news now, and the Italian Prime Minister says attempts to put him on trial are destroying the country's reputation abroad. Silvio Berlusconi faces allegations that he had sex with an underage girl. The 74-year-old also faces charges of abuse of office for trying to cover it up. Lawrence Lee has more.
He may be one of the great survivors, but there's no doubting Silvio Berlusconi has reason to worry. Even given his ability to hold on to power despite all kinds of allegations of financial or personal impropriety in the past, there now appears to be so much evidence linking him firstly to a young showgirl known as Ruby, and then to sex games known as bunga bunga parties, that prosecutors believe they've got enough against him to have a criminal trial straight away. Like everything to do with Berlusconi, this case has split Italy. This time apparently with the young saying he deserves everything he gets, but older people prepared to forgive the aging politician.
This is absolutely just. I think it's incredible that people still don't understand what kind of person he is. He must start paying the price for what he's done.
The best thing would be for Berlusconi to resign and then a transitional government to come in to work on electoral law.
Well, he loves what he does. He should just do it a bit more cleverly, like many others do.
Berlusconi's been lucky in that his opponents have been unable to capitalise on his problems in the past. Now, though, they smell blood.
We want the judges to make the truth come out, and we want him to go to trial. That's the only thing we ask. Then, if he's innocent, God bless him, and in a couple of weeks, we will know the truth.
Still, you don't get to hold on to power for as long as Berlusconi has, without being able to face down unpleasant allegations. And so the obvious response has been to claim a smear campaign.
It's just embarrassing, it's disgusting and shameful. The thing about these trials is that they're false trials. The accusations are